not super active on social, but I'd posted a picture in 2015 of me at Disney with my family, and I posted the caption says better never stops even on vacation. And it's got two laptops in the lobby at the Disney Yacht Club. And I think what is painful about that is because I remember that. I remember, needing to run a team meeting. I mean, that's what it was. And so it was about a month later after that, I was doing CrossFit. And I don't do, clearly you can see I don't do CrossFit now, but at the time I was kind of doing some of that stuff. And we ran around the parking lot to get warmed up, and I started to feel like pains in my chest, like really sharp pains in my chest. And it kind of freaked me out. I'd never really experienced that before. And I call a doctor, physician friend of mine. I go see him. He runs some tests. He had an in-office EKG machine, and he said, "You know what, Bradley? I see some stuff that's a little concerning to me. We need to get you in to see a cardiologist." So I did the next day. I went and had a stress test. Well, look, you can imagine at the end of the day, like that 24 hours, I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is going on with my heart?" Thinking something's wrong. And we do the stress test, the treadmill, the whole 9 yards, and I was decently fit at the time, and so
Right,
it
right.
wasn't that big of a deal. And the cardiologist came in and said, "Nothing wrong with your heart, but I don't know what you've got going on in your life, but you might want to change it."
Mental health champions, thank you for stopping by another show. It is time for a mental health break. I am Vincent Lanci, and I was excited to connect with Brad originally for that entrepreneur show. As it happens from time to time, I learn their story, and there's a lot of value they can bring here. Today is going to focus specifically on stress-related scares in the workplace, how things get extremely intense with our jobs, and we forget to take care of ourselves. Bradley's been courageous enough to share his story, and it's very impactful because if you see how far he came, which you will by the end of the episode, Bradley, this experience that happened right around age 34, what happened?
Yeah. So I learned from my dad, who's a small business owner, specifically in agriculture, the value of hard work. And I didn't learn it in the sense that he taught it to me. I just caught it. I picked it up from him. I saw him work, all the time. I mean, it's what it takes when you're farming. And so obviously that came at some sacrifices of, missing ball games. That was really important to me. He certainly was not coaching my teams when I was growing up. And but I was so grateful for that. And I took that skill along with sales skills. That's was some of my first jobs out of college. And so those two things really propelled me initially in the business. And what I want to share with people listening is that it was working. Okay. So it's not one of these things where, well, if that doesn't work, you're going to do something different over time. And so it was working until it wasn't. And so we've got a picture. I'm not super active on social, but I'd posted a picture in 2015 of me at Disney with my family, and I posted the caption says better never stops even on vacation. And it's got two laptops in the lobby at the Disney Yacht Club. And I think what is painful about that is because I remember that. I remember, needing to run a team meeting. I mean, that's what it was. And so it was about a month later after that, I was doing CrossFit. And I don't do, clearly you can see I don't do CrossFit now, but at the time I was kind of doing some of that stuff. And we ran around the parking lot to get warmed up, and I started to feel like pains in my chest, like really sharp pains in my chest. And it kind of freaked me out. I'd never really experienced that before. And I call a doctor, physician friend of mine. I go see him. He runs some tests. He had an in-office EKG machine, and he said, "You know what, Bradley? I see some stuff that's a little concerning to me. We need to get you in to see a cardiologist." So I did the next day. I went and had a stress test. Well, look, you can imagine at the end of the day, like that 24 hours, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on with with my heart, thinking something's wrong. And, we do the stress test, the treadmill, the whole 9 yards. And, I was decently fit at the time. And so it
Right.
wasn't that big of a deal. And the cardiologist came in and said, nothing wrong with your heart, but I don't know what you've got going on in your life, but you might want to change it. And like it was a moment of like, yeah, I need to change something, but I really didn't know what to change, because the thing that I had been working in the business to get it to that point, had kind of stopped working. And so I was, I ran out of time. I mean, that's what I tell people is I simply just ran out of time. And so, in the movie, did you see, I'm sure everybody did, Top Gun Maverick,
The original ones.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the new one that came out.
I didn't see the new one. I didn't see the new one.
Oh, you haven't seen the new one. Oh,
No.
people, okay. Well, you got to go see the new one. Okay, first of all, that came out about a couple years ago. But for those that have seen it, you know that there's this scene at the beginning of the movie where he's in this new fancy airplane and he's trying to go Mach 10, and he goes Mach 10, and then he pushes it a little bit further to try to go Mach 10.1, 10.2, right? So, and then the plane blows up. Well, that's kind of how that's the imagery of like where I was. Like I was like, just Vincent, a little bit more. And so really that was I knew something needed to change. And I love business. And so it's sometimes hard for me to shut it off, even still to this
Of course.
day.
Always.
So you have to have in our world, we feel like you have to really architect it. You have to architect things around you because otherwise you will get burned out again. And so that's a little bit about my story.
I love that architecture life I'm putting in the show notes. The pain that you never had in your chest, that's certainly scary. I've had some stress induce similar situations, I guess you could say, where work was the common denominator, pushing it too hard, these unrealistic expectations I was always setting for myself, had to
Mm.
start taking a back seat. You mentioned there architecting your life, you had to make some changes. What were some of the immediate things you did, the smaller steps to start setting the stage to where you ultimately knew you needed to be?
Yeah, I'm going to really centralize a lot of the comments today on the work that I did personally.
Okay.
A lot of the times, and we've talked obviously on one of your other podcasts about some of the things that I did in the business. Okay, so like what were really some of the business stuff? And I think what I'll share today is some of the things that I do now, and that some of the
Okay.
things I needed to do to basically like architect it in a different way. Okay. The first and foremost thing as an entrepreneur, I had zero control over my calendar. Everybody else did. The other thing is I didn't honor my calendar. So there were two aspects to this. People were just plopping in things at different times. I was beholden to everyone else's schedule. I did not design what we now call your perfect repeatable week. I didn't design that. I had no structure at all for my time. I didn't honor my time. And if I did randomly decide, like, I probably shouldn't do that at that time, I wasn't honoring to it. I didn't keep to my commitments. And so I'll share if you want me to. We can get into some really specifics of how I have
Please.
designed my week. But I think what's important is not for people to say that they need to mimic my schedule. I don't believe that at all. What I do believe and what we do suggest is that people start by designing their perfect repeatable week. Now, I want to be clear, just because it's a perfect repeatable week doesn't mean that every week is going to be that way by no stretch of the imagination. But if you at least know what a perfect week looks like, then you can begin to say, like, okay, that's ideally what I would want it to look like. Now, what are the things that I need to do to be able to try to make the business and my time kind of work for me? Does that make sense?
Of course, we all have different things that work great for us. We all have things that don't work very well for us. Finding that perfect week, I think, is great advice because when we get in our zones, we all know we're at the top of our game.
Yeah.
It's when we fall out of that zone that things start become challenging. Thank you for sharing some of that. It definitely has some value in it. Now that you have had this experience, when you get overwhelmed and you get in these mimic states, these smaller states that resemble that feeling, what do you immediately do? Do you just shut down, or how does this work? And what's your process?
So my mom passed away about a month and a half ago.
I'm sorry, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. She had battled cancer for a long time. And the reason I say that is because from March, she started to really kind of go downhill. Early March, so March, April, May, June, that period of time, it was difficult. It was, to be honest with you, it was really, really tough. My schedule was, she was about an hour and a half away. There was a lot of going back and forth to see her, not to mention the feeling of I need to be over there every day, which was unreasonable for me to try to be over there every day, but I tried to be there as much as I could because we knew she ended up going in hospice care at the time. The reason I shared that specifically is because we all have seasons, and I'm just going to be honest with you that
True.
that season was really difficult on my time, right? Because the normal things that I would have, I was doing some work on driving, right? But mentally, okay, it was very difficult for me to be able to balance all the things for all the companies and then obviously be there. And so I first want to share with people is that I needed to also give myself grace. So before I get into tactical things, like, yes, I did do some things, and we'll share that. Some things I did with my EA.
Please, yeah.
Man, the first thing I needed to do is actually say, like, hey, Bradley, you are where you need to be because the business and all these other things will be there. Like, you do need to spend some time with your mom. Does that make sense? That's the first thing. Like,
Of course.
actually being okay.
We're
All right.
our own worst critic. We're always our harshest
Oh, yeah.
naysayer, and we have to,
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but finding ways to do that is incredible.
Yeah. So I needed to give myself a little grace. That was it first. All right. So secondly, what did I do and what have I done? Well, after that, about a week after that, I said, you know what? I'm going to recommit. I'm going to recommit to my own fitness regimen because it had slipped during that 3 months.
Yeah.
Admittedly, right? It had slipped. The time that I normally would have been working out, even, I started because I was on the road a lot more, driving back and forth. What do you end up doing? You end up having more fast food or,
Hmm.
more Chick-fil-A, even if you're, like that sort of
I
thing. And
hate that when it happens. It does, though.
yeah, it does. And while I didn't really gain much weight per se, but like I didn't feel as good. My sleep was off. I wear a Whoop, and so I could tell those things were really off, and it was affecting the way that I showed up on podcast or my own podcast or in other things. So I really recommitted to putting my oxygen mask on first. So I recommitted to that. Like I could even show you my health tracker that I have of I was tracking my calories, tracking my sleep, et cetera. And that came off the back of that. The second thing that I did and have done is to go back to my EA and I said, okay, let's look at this again. Now, we were going to do it anyway. We recommend business owners to look at their perfect repeatable week every quarter. So for 4 times a year. Okay. And so we looked at it, and one of the things is, as I said, I had previously said I don't want to take meetings before 9 a.m. Okay. And so but we moved that back to 10. And so now I don't take any calls, any meetings before 10 a.m. Usually I wake up, in the 5:45 to 6 o'clock realm. I mean, we can get into that if you want to, but I usually wake up 5:45 or 6, and that gives me 4 hours, 4 hours that I can, be with the kids, get them to school, et cetera, that sort of thing. But also allows me to do the deep work that actually I need to do as a maker. The things that come out of that 4 hours are unbelievably valuable for the business. The other thing is we have a hard cutoff. We have a hard cutoff to where 4 p.m. because I have school kids age and their dance and basketball practices and golf practices and things of that nature. So that's just the season of life. And so my work schedule is 10 to right at 4 o'clock, right? So there's 6 hours, 4 days a week that my EA has to slot things in. And then on Fridays, there's 2 hours. She has 10 to 12 to slot something in, whether it's podcast guesting spot, a coaching call that I may have, et cetera. And that's it. That's what she's got to be able to work with. And if it doesn't slot in, then we push it out a few weeks. But it's funny how what happens though is that it can come across as selfish. It actually is the most selfless thing because I show up the best version of me that I can for you. Like it would not be honoring to you to come onto your podcast for you and your listeners if I was exhausted. If this was at, I don't know, 5:30 and I has just been going all day and I'm tired of looking at a camera. I'm tired of looking at Zoom. And then I was like, yeah, man, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just really tired. Really like it wouldn't be honoring to me for you and your listeners to do that. So I will share that with business owners is that the most selfless thing that you can do is to show up as the best version of yourself. And so now we book things in at the time that's best for me so that I'm the best version I can be for either our customers, uh, podcasting, or even for my team.
I love the message. I do something a little similar where I have, we all have our morning routines. And when I have to rush that morning routine to get on a call or get on a task that's not in line with me, it throws my whole day off. So now on Mondays, I have a block until 10 where I finish my writing as a ghostwriter. I have my few assignments. The next morning, there's a block for certain things to prep my podcast day. All of these things I need to do to maintain a smooth day where I'm not that 5:30 feeling at the end of the day not performing, not giving it my best. Even though I wake up at 3 o'clock every day in the gym or exercising 3:30, I have to do what I need to do to lengthen my day. Only having things scheduled during certain times, I love that. I have podcasting windows like you're in right now, where my VA can book podcasts during these windows because
Yep.
this is where I'm in my mode to write and not trying again to mimic that perfect week. Like you're saying, that these are some of the things that have to be done. We covered a whole lot today, and I'm so glad that you were able to come forward with your story. Before we sign off, I always like to ask, what's one piece of advice you can give to someone who may be at rock bottom, may be at their lowest right now, having a tough time finding a way to move forward?
The hardest thing that I've had to been that I've had to learn personally and professionally is to not isolate and actually pick up the phone and call somebody and say, "Hey, I'm struggling." I mean, it's still difficult. It's still difficult, to and I think it's also difficult as a man. And I'm not saying females don't have the challenge with that too, but I can only speak from my experience to be able to share with someone both personally and professionally. And I have different people that I'm struggling with that. Okay, so like if I'm having a difficulty in the business, I'm frustrated with something with my team, or I'm frustrated with just where the business is. I have people that I can call and say, "Hey, man, can I just share with you?" Because like one of my best friends, Jonathan, he's not a business owner. So if I was struggling with something in the business, he wouldn't have contextually the right things. And so he would listen, but he wouldn't necessarily be able to kind of speak into that. But if I'm working through something difficult personally, okay, then he's one of the guys that I'm going to call. But I can call Greg, who I might be struggling with something in the business, and he's a business owner and he can relate. But listen, if you're struggling, it is a really hard step to grab the phone and say, you know what, this is a tough day. I think I'm actually going to call Vincent, and I'm gonna say, hey, can you talk? Right. And so that's one of the. It's so easy to hear that, and I would hear it too. But man, the value of that comes out of that, and how much better I feel after I pick up the phone and call somebody is it's so worth it.
I love the message. You are never alone. I try to help you realize this on this podcast. We all are not perfect. We all have our ups and downs in life, but just remembering that we will find a way to get up through inspirational testimonials like today can help us get there. I want to thank you so much, Bradley, for taking some time to come on another pod with me. Everyone, that entrepreneur show will be released later on. This is here, ready to go. Where can people say hi to you online?
Oh, cool. Well, if they want to connect with me personally, they can find me on LinkedIn. It's a great place to connect. they want to learn more about our company and how we help people become the architect of their business, they can go to blueprintos.com/assets. Be cool.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing. Everyone, be sure to go say hi to Bradley and get ready to tune in again next week for another great conversation. I am at Vincent A. Lanci to learn more on all social media and my website, vincentalanci.com. The show is all over at A Mental Health Break on social media, all podcast platforms, and the show is brought to you by Coming Alive Podcast Production, the number one stop for all podcasting needs. Learn more about them at comingalivepodcastproduction.com. But today, we are signing off on A Mental Health Break with Bradley. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.